Matt from Ace Appliance in Toledo, Ohio. Welcome back to another in-home diagnostic video brought to you by ApplianceVideo.com. The tools that were needed for this repair, we used a drill with a Phillips bit. You could use just a Phillips screwdriver if need be. An ohm meter to check the continuity of the fuse. And we just used a pair of needle nose pliers just to pull the terminals off. What we have here is a KitchenAid built-in single oven. The customer's complaint is it's not baking or broiling. What they recently did was ran a self-clean cycle. So the first thing we did was we hit it to bake, set it at 350, started it up, let it preheat for 5 minutes or so, and we checked. We had no heat whatsoever coming from the bake element. Checked broil also, went through the same sequence, no heat from either side. So what we're assuming happened is the thermal overload on the back wall of the oven cavity is probably going to be blown. That thermostat blows at 130 degrees. So a lot of times on a self-clean cycle with the temperatures that it reaches and maintains for extended period of time, without a whole lot of ventilation, that fuse can tend to blow. There's typically some type of a cooling fan or something that's in here also. We're just going to make sure that that's going to be operating. So we're going to go ahead and pull the oven and get to the back wall. So to pull this, okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to get the door out of the way and just go ahead and flip it up just like that. And then you lift the door up. And it pulls right off. That'll just be a little bit less weight when we're pulling the oven out. And we've got 2 screws here for the trim piece. Okay, and that gives us access to our 2 mounting screws that hold the oven in place. Now at this point, before we go any further, we're going to go ahead and flip the breaker to kill the power to the unit. Alright, now we're just going to go ahead and remove the 2 mounting screws on each side. Now the oven should slide out. Alright, so all we're going to do here is we're just going to grab right up underneath. It's easier if you have 2 guys just because you could do it by yourself and just kind of lift up and slide out and then grab it down at the bottom. Make sure we have enough slack on the line, which we do, and we can just set it right down onto the floor here. And we're going to be taking the back panel off here. This should be where the thermal overload is located. Alright, we're going to go ahead and remove the Phillips screws around the back panel here. And that's going to give us access to our thermal overload right there. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to test this thermal overload. So to check it, we're going to go ahead and pull one of the terminals off. And we're just going to basically check it for continuity. It's just an open and closed circuit. And the thermostat the fuse is open. So the fuse is bad. So we will need to replace that. And that should rectify the problem. So the new fuse looks a little bit different. Just going to go ahead and we'll pull the other terminal off there. Got 2 Phillips screws that are holding the fuse in place. So that's what our old thermal cutoff looks like. And this is the new one. They're both 130 degrees Celsius fuses. I'm just going to go ahead and set the new one in place. before we hook it all up, even though the fuse is good, brand new, we're just going to test it. And we do have continuity through the new one. We're going to go ahead, hook our wires back up to it. And as you can see, the reason why this kills power to bake and broil, this is one side of the broil element here, which the 120 volts has to flow in through here, runs up and goes to one side of the broil, and the other side, it's kind of a piggyback terminal here, is going to run down and go to one side of the bake element. So if this fuse is open, they don't get 120 to either side, which would cause no bake or broil. So at this point, we're just going to go ahead and put the cover back on and mount the unit back in place and test it out. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and just put the cover back on here. Let's do a quick check. Make sure all your terminals are tight. Nothing fell off. Okay, now we're just going to go ahead and set it back up into the cabinet. Okay, we're just going to go ahead and turn it around. Just lift it right up into the cabinet here. Make sure it sits flush. You'll be able to see your mounting holes kind of line up for you. And then we're just going to go ahead and put our 2 mounting screws back in. Once we got it mounted, before we do anything else, we'll go ahead, we'll flip the breaker back on, and we're going to check to make sure it's operating properly. So after you flip the breaker back on, what you want to do before you try anything is just let the oven sit and make sure, give it about 5 minutes. Make sure it doesn't heat up on its own. If you've got a stuck relay or a dead short in your wiring somewhere, that may potentially cause one of the bake or the broil elements to stay on all the time, and that would also cause the fuse to blow. We're assuming that's not the case at this point because the problem happened around the self-clean cycle, but just gonna kind of keep an eye on it for a couple minutes here. Well, this particular oven's not gonna operate unless the door is closed, so we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna put our trim pieces back on. Again, basically once we plugged it in or got power back to it, just gonna let it sit for a few minutes, make sure it doesn't heat up on its own, just to confirm that the relays aren't stuck on the control board. We're gonna go ahead and put our trim pieces on. They just sort of slide up and you get the little mounting screw down at the bottom there. Now the door, you've got a little notch right there that you gotta just sort of set in on the hinge. Should feel it kind of lock into place. Open the door down and flip both the stoppers back up. Close the door. Make sure your light's turning on and off. That the door's seating up flush. So at this point, we'll go ahead and test operation. Set it to bake, 350. Start it up. This bake element will take a couple minutes before you can really feel a decent amount of heat because it's underneath the bottom panel. It's not an exposed element. And we do hear the cooling fan running. So that's one thing that you want to always listen for. you should feel some airflow that's coming out of the front here. If that cooling fan does fail, you could potentially be having issues even at lower temperatures, 350, 400 degrees. Okay, it's been on for a couple minutes here. We've got good heat coming out of it. We can see that the broil element is also glowing. This is going to actually alternate between the bake and the broil element for the preheat cycle to get more of an even heat in the unit. So bake and broil are working. We're going to go ahead and cancel it. Just set it to broil only and start it up just to make sure that the broil cycle is working properly. And as long as it is, that's going to complete the repair. Basically what we did was the oven was in a self-clean cycle. It blew a thermal overload due to probably just poor airflow being stuck inside of a cabinet like this. It will happen with older ovens. We replaced the thermal overload, plugged it all in, checked to make sure we didn't have a stuck relay or a cooling fan not operating properly, which we didn't have either of those, so it was just an issue of the clean cycle that caused the thermal overload to blow. We replaced the thermal overload, checked operation of bake and broil elements, and they're both operating properly now. At the beginning we didn't have bake or broil. The thermal overload pretty much terminates all oven activity. So now we got the new thermal overload installed and we shouldn't have any problems with it. Thank you for watching another quality video from ApplianceVideo.com.